How's it going, Brandy? You're muted if you're trying to talk. David, good to see you. Do you have a microphone on your machine, David?
My husband
Yes, I do.
had to mute.
Cool.
I couldn't find the link.
You couldn't find the link, is that what you said?
I couldn't.
That's all right. I was 4 minutes late anyway, so it was perfect timing.
Okay, well, I just called Julia, said, girl, send me the link. So she's coming on here in just a second.
Yeah, she said she's logging in.
Hi, Charlie.
Hello, hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry, I just got your text too, Brandy. All right.
I'm seeing your email from last night, Cameron.
Do you know what version of General CAD he's using? I know you said it was an older one, right?
It was what?
Did you say he's using an older version of General CAD?
If I had to guess, I would say yes. I think he said it was General. I thought I emailed it last night. But either way, it's no big deal. He's already converted quite a bit for me. I think he put it in DWG or DXF. I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah, I emailed the guys last night and said that there's a CT button you can use to batch convert. So hopefully that works on his version. If not, it might be worth just, getting the upgraded version just to, I mean, it depends on how many files you have, I suppose.
A bunch.
So
Like probably 1,000.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm so glad your eyes didn't bug out of your head when I said 1,000.
Oh, that's not very many. I've done tens of thousands.
Okay.
So, all right. Well, welcome everybody. Sorry I'm late. It was my fault, not yours. Julia said she's logging on, but she hasn't quite jumped in. So, at least I don't think she has. Nope. All right. So we'll just go ahead and start. Questions, I guess, from last time. David, I know you weren't here, so that's okay if you don't know what we talked about last time. Last time we just went over the standard toolbar at the top of Memorial Designer. Have you used Memorial Designer at all, David?
No, I haven't at all.
Okay, so that's good. So what we're doing here is a series of beginner lessons. We started 3 or 4 lessons ago. We're doing it on Tuesday mornings and Friday mornings at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And the sessions are recorded and posted to my YouTube channel. So you can go back and watch them, the ones that you missed. I haven't yet posted the one from Friday yet, but I'll get that posted today. And then this upcoming Friday, I'm actually going to be gone. So we can either reschedule for Thursday, or we can just skip Friday. We think about that.
Thursday. Let's do Thursday.
You want to do Thursday instead? Okay,
Please.
so we'll just reschedule to Thursday at 10 and instead of Friday. That way we keep our 2 lessons a week, which is good. So anyway, feel free to interrupt me if you need to, David. If you have questions on anything, I'd much rather have you ask questions than be confused on something. If there's a term that you don't understand, if there's anything you don't understand, go ahead and ask, and don't be afraid to interrupt. Brandy, do you have any questions or anything that you were struggling with last time? Anything that you didn't understand?
No, I still need to do some practice to kind of hash out, flesh out my problems. But this is exactly what I need. And at least, this is being captured into perpetuity. So, I can refer back to it. So that's the recordings are fantastic for me. And it's now finally on a layer and a level that I can understand. Like I need all the basics. And you going through just all the toolboxes and everything and showing me how they work and what they do is very helpful.
Good. Well, I think we're going to continue along that path today. So I'm going to share my screen. Make sure I'm sharing the right one here. Share screen number. What is my screen number 4? I think it's number 4. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Okay. Sharing screen number 4. Okay. So let me know if you see my screen, if you see CorelDRAW opened up.
I do.
Okay. So David, last time we just talked about this top toolbar here, which is the standard toolbar, and what all those different functions are. So today, what we're going to jump down to is the next one down, which is this middle one, and it is called the property bar. The reason that it's called the property bar is that it changes its properties based on the tool that you have selected. Okay, so if you have nothing selected at all, this is your standard property bar that you see. So we're just going to talk about what each of these buttons mean, okay? So letter, this is your page size, and they've got all sorts of default standard sizes based on printing. Because we don't normally print out on paper, these aren't really going to come in handy, except that, you know, if you're doing a brochure or if you are printing out paper for your customer to see, you know, then it makes sense to pay attention to this. But for the most part, I actually hide the page and the page border so you don't even see that. If you click on this button way over here, the page border button, you'll see that there is a page and a page border, but most of the time I hide that because I don't want to see it. I think it gets in the way and it's distracting of what I want to do. But that's what that is. That's the page that you currently have. And if you want to switch it to legal, for instance, it'll just switch to that default size. So the next number over is the dimensions of that page. And then new to CorelDRAW 2021 is this button, which is called Autofit. So if you had a couple things on your page, you can autofit now and tell it how much of a margin you want. So let's say I want a 1-inch margin and autofit the page. It's going to build my page around those. So if I now look at my page border, you're going to see a page that's got a 1-inch border all the way around all of those objects that were on the screen. I think it works based off selection. Nah, maybe it doesn't because it doesn't show up there. So I guess it's just based off of everything on the page. That's new to 2021. If you're in an older version, you're not going to see that option. Okay, so next is the orientation of your page, whether it's portrait or landscape. And again, I'll just turn on the page border so you can see. Portrait is going to rotate at 90 degrees. Landscape is going to keep it the way that it was. And I'll go back to having a letter size page just so that you can see better how that works. So that's if you want to print it out portrait. That's if you want to print it out landscape. Okay. The next button is if you want to resize the page. So let's say we wanted to do a specific page of 12 inches by 12 inches and we hit enter. This button is whether or not you want that to apply to every page in the document, or the next one over is to the current page as opposed to all the pages. So if we had multiple pages in our document, and I'll just make a few extra pages down here, I could go to page 2, and let's say page 2 I want it to be 6 inches. So I can do a 6-inch by 6-inch page, and it's going to resize that page to 6 inches. But because I clicked on current page only, it shouldn't have changed this one. So this one's still at 12 inches. So page 2 is set for 6 inches. 3 and 4 should still be at 12 because that's what they were before. And so that's what these two buttons do, are control whether or not you want to change all page sizes or just the current one that you're on. When it comes to pages, there are a couple things that I use pages for. One is if you're printing or if you're exporting out to a PDF file. PDFs by default will only export what's inside that page border. So I often mess with the page border if I'm doing that. If I'm printing to a printer, of course, I want to make sure I've got the right page size for the printer that I'm printing to. And then the other thing is if the advanced plotting device's flatbed cutter, for instance, has the ability to, it works off of the page size because it starts in the lower left-hand corner. So a lot of times people will set up a page that's 60 inches by 30 inches because that's how big the cutter is going to cut in one swipe. And so you can lay out your different stones like this, you know, if you had different shaped stones and rotate them and whatever else, so that you can maximize your stencil. You can set up all your different pieces of stone.
That is a really cool feature.
So that's another thing that I would use pages for. So there's definitely use to pages, but when I'm doing design work, when I'm showing, you know, when I'm putting together my my shapes and that sort of stuff, I find that the page border itself gets in the way. And so I turn it off while I'm doing my design work. And then I only turn it back on when I need to output to something specific. Okay. The next one over is units, and that's just whether you live in America and want to use inches, or whether you're sending things off to Europe or Asia or whatever and need to go to different units. There are all sorts of units in here that you'll never use, that I've never used, and maybe I don't even know what half of these are. Ciceros and Didots, who knows? I mean, I could look it up, but they're not things that I'm going to use. Most often I'm using inches. If I'm doing things overseas, I'll use millimeters. And then if I'm doing things web-based, I'll use pixels. That's about all I ever do myself. But you can certainly use the other ones if you ever wanted to.
So if I was drawing in inches and I was going to send something to somebody in millimeter land, it'll just, like, if I change that, that's just going to convert that over, right?
Yeah, so the way that the units works is this is the units for your document. So if you switch it over to millimeters, everything now in this document is going to show up as millimeters. And it's going to save that way when you save the document. It's going to save as millimeters being your default for that document. So that when whoever opens it up on the other end opens it, they're going to see that it's in millimeters. So if you get stuff from China or whatever, and that's what they use, it'll often come in as millimeters because that's what it is. But you can always go up and switch those units over to inches so that you can see, you know, what they are in your standard measurement. But yeah, it auto converts. I mean, it's just going to show you the difference between, you know, inches and whatever it is, millimeters. Good question though. Okay, so typically I'm going to work in inches. The next thing over is called your nudge distance. Nudge is the distance for moving objects with your keyboard, the arrows on your keyboard, the up, down, left, and right arrows. By default, CorelDRAW has a 0.01 inch nudge, which for me is too small. So I will usually change it to a 1/4 of an inch. That way, when I grab an object and hit the left arrow, every time it moves, it's going to move to a 1/4 of an inch. I can show you that here if I change my axis to 0, 0. So this is now at 0, 0. If I push to the left once, it's now going to be at -0.25 because I've nudged it once. If you hold Control, you can do a micro nudge. So that's going to be half that amount, or 1/8 of an inch. And if you do...
Hey, Cameron.
Yep.
Will you turn on your keystroke thing
Yep.
also, please?
Yeah, I have them on. I think they moved to my other screen. So let me see if I can move them. Give me just a second.
That really does help me when I'm watching.
Let's see, loud drag.
Sorry to interrupt your flow. Thank
No,
you.
you're fine. And you know, sometimes on the recorded version, it looked like the keystroke thing actually got covered up by videos. So I'm going to put it down here. So hopefully it doesn't get in the way of the videos.
Okay.
We'll see what happens. Let me know if you can't see it though.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, if you hold Control and click then it's going to do half. And if you do shift and click, it's going to do double. Those, the amounts, whether it's half or 10 times or whatever, is controlled in options. So you can go in there and change it if you want to. But the reason that I do 1/4 of an inch is because that way I can do 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, and 1/2 inch spacing all off my keyboard, depending on whether I'm holding control, shift, or nothing. So that's what nudge is. But because nudge disappears, just like you can see if I click on an object, now nudge disappears because the property bar has changed. I moved the nudge up here onto the standard toolbar so that I've always got access to it, because I use it so much to nudge while I'm doing things. I put it up here. That way I've got a nudge distance that I can change on the fly. But that's why it's going to show up in 2 places, because by default it's already here, but I moved it up because I want it all the time.
Cameron,
Yep.
can you also put my group and ungroup tool on that top bar for me?
So I'll show you how to do that. Okay. If I move this toolbar over so that I've got extra space. Okay. So there's my project timer toolbar has a little white bar right here. And if you click on that, you'll see, if I move my cursor over, you'll see how it gives the 2 left and right arrows. That means that I can click and drag and move that around.
Okay.
And it might look a little different depending on whether you have your toolbars locked. If I right click on this, there's an option to lock toolbars. So if I have them locked, you don't see this little dotted thing next to it. That's the handle that you can grab and move your toolbar wherever you want. So anyway, so there's, I'm just moving that over, right, to get it out of the way. Actually, I need to, I'm just going to turn it off for now. I'll move this one. So there's some extra space right here. Okay. And if I wanted to take the ungroup and group things, first, they're not going to show up unless I have something grouped. So if I grab 2 pieces, now they're going to show up here. So I've got group, ungroup, and ungroup all. Or they show up under object and group. Okay, so you can get to them either place. To move things around on your workspace, what you do is you look at the thing that you want, and then if you hold Control and Alt at the same time, and then you left click and drag, what it does is it makes a copy of that particular thing. If you don't hold Control, it's only going to move it. And you don't necessarily want to move it off this toolbar. You want to copy it, right? So that you've got the same. That's what I did with the nudge. If I didn't move it, I just copied it. So you can hold Control, Alt, click and drag, and then you just let go of your mouse, and that's they'll just drop right there. Again, they're not going to show the ungroup option unless you have something grouped. So now that I group something, it's going to show up there.
Okay, I love that.
So you can have those wherever you want. If you want to put them on the standard toolbar, that's fine. What I would suggest is if you're making your own workspace changes, would actually be to create your own toolbar and then put that toolbar where you want it on the workspace. To do that, same kind of workflow, except that instead what we're going to do is instead of dragging onto a current toolbar, I'm just going to hold Control, Alt, and drag out here into the workspace, and that will create a new toolbar for me. And then I'll just do the same thing and keep going and create my new toolbar. So now I've got a new toolbar. It just gets named automatically new toolbar. You can rename it if you want to. You just click on the blank space of it, say customize, new toolbar, 3 toolbar, and say properties. And then that's going to go into the properties of that toolbar for you. And now I can right click on, I think maybe it's double click and something. There, you just kind of click and hold, and then I can rename this as Cameron's Custom or something like that, right? So then I've got my own toolbar that I can mess with and add anything that I want to it. And now I've got my own toolbar that I can throw up here and, you know, place it where I want to. the reason that it's not showing up is because I've got this little hidden toolbar up there. But now that I put it up there, so now I've got this toolbar right there. So I don't really need these ones anymore. So I'm just going to hold Alt, click and drag off onto the workspace. And what that will do is what it's supposed to do. Give it a second here. Come on. Let's see if it works. Holding Alt, click and drag. There we go. So clicking and dragging, you'll see the cursor changes to an X, and that's because I'm deleting it. I'm just pulling it off and getting rid of it. So by holding Alt and clicking off into the workspace, you're getting rid of those toolbar icons.
Okay.
That's why you'll always want to hold Control, otherwise you're moving things around, right? So now I've got my own toolbar here that I can add stuff to, and it's not going to mess with anything else. That way, what you can do is you can also export out your workspace. You can save your workspace and that sort of stuff, so that you've always got this toolbar that you like, so that in future versions you can bring in your own toolbar. You know, because every time you install my workspace, it's going to overwrite the workspace, and so your customizations aren't necessarily going to be there. So you either need to export your workspace as your own, or individual pieces from that workspace.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's how you can do that if you want to do that. So we've got our nudge distance. And then the next thing over is called the duplicate distance. If you have an object and you go up to edit and duplicate, or Control D on the keyboard, what that's going to do is it's going to make a duplicate of your item, but it's going to make it this far away from your original. So we've got it set to go 1/4 of an inch to the right and 1/4 of an inch up. That way, when you duplicate, it's going to, every time you do that, it's going to move that much. So if I change this to 10 on the X and 0 on the Y, and then when I hit Control D, it's going to move it, or it's going to make a copy of it over here 10 inches away. I don't actually use duplicate a lot, but that's what it does if you want to use it. And the last thing on
the
last thing on here is treat all objects as filled.
I mean, this is obviously an overlay that they're putting in that we don't have yet.
Yep.
Hey, David.
Yes.
I think we're getting some background from you. If you could just mute yourself while, if you've got background noise there, unless you were talking to me. I think it was you, because you're the only one that's not muted. Thank you, sir. So what treat all objects as filled does is it works as if this design had a fill in it. Right now I can't click it because it has no fill. But if I say treat all objects as filled, then anywhere I click inside of this object, it's going to select it as if it had a fill. I don't particularly like that, because I find myself selecting things more often than not that I don't want to select, which is why I turn it off by default. But that's what it does. And then at the end of the bar is a plus sign. So you can add frequently used items or remove things that you don't normally use. So if you want to adjust what's on this toolbar, you can pull things off that you don't really want, or you can add, you know, if there are extra options, you can add to them. That's what the plus sign is for, is to help you more easily customize that toolbar itself. Okay, any questions on that stuff, on the property bar?
No, that's good.
Okay, so what you'll notice though is as soon as I click on something, that property bar is going to change. Okay, so now all of a sudden I've got a whole bunch of other stuff that wasn't there before. I don't have the page stuff anymore, but now I have this, for instance, the object origin. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the property bar for selecting standard objects. But I'm going to draw a couple different things here so that you can see. If I click on this line, you'll notice over here some of these tools, if I click on the rectangle, they change. Okay. The reason for that is because the properties of this object change and they allow certain things to happen that other objects don't. So that's why this is going to change often, is based on the thing that you have selected, based on the tool that you have selected. So if I select a shape tool instead, you know, it's going to give me different options as well. So I would guess probably, you know, each one of these different scenarios would need to be a video all by itself because there are so many different things that it can do. But we'll just talk about a couple of them today. So the first one is, if I were to just select this rectangle, for instance, we've got up here something called object origin. The object origin tells when you are resizing things, how it needs to grow. So right now it's growing or shrinking from the center. So if I were to change this size to 10 inches by 10 inches and hit enter, it's going to stay so that my center stays where it's at. If I change the object origin by clicking on one of these 9 boxes, that becomes the origin. Now my lower left-hand corner is the origin. So if I change now to 20 inches wide, it's going to stay here at the lower left, but grow to the right. If I change it to 20 inches tall, it's going to grow upward instead of how it was before, based off of center. You'll also notice that it changed our what are called your object position, which is your XY coordinate. If you look at your rulers, okay, this is the coordinate of your origin. So if we look at the ruler here, 0 and 0, our object origin is -5 this way and -5 this way. And so that's the bottom left-hand corner of our object, is -5, -5. If we wanted that to be at 0, 0, we can tell it to be at 0, 0 in the bottom left-hand corner, which then changes all of these numbers. Depending on, you know, which one we click, it's going to change because that's how big our object is. The reason that you would want to use this more often than not is because you want to size an object to a specific size, but not move it in a certain direction. So for instance, let's just say I had a shape like this. Okay, so I started with my shape builder and I wanted to make this taller, but I don't want it to go down into the base. If I just made it taller right now, let's say I made it 24 inches, it's going to go up by 2 and down by 2. So now it's going into where the base is. So if I undo that and instead change my object origin to the middle of the bottom, then as I change this size, it's going to only grow upward as opposed to any other direction. Okay, so that's one use case for why you would want to use object origin. Get rid of the rest of the stuff. Again, that's not going to show up unless I have something selected, because when nothing is selected, there is no origin. So I have to have something selected in order for that stuff to show up. The next thing over, like I already mentioned, is your XY coordinate. So that's just positive is this direction, negative is this direction. Same thing for the Y axis. So Y is up and down, X is left and right. Those are where they sit on the ruler. This is how big the actual object is. So it's 36 inches wide by 24 inches tall, and that's at the tallest point, which is this point here. It's not giving us how tall it is to the edge right here. It's giving us how tall it is to the tallest point. One nice thing about these is you can do math inside of them. You can change your units inside of them. So we had talked about going from inches to millimeters before, which is nice. But if you wanted to do that on the fly, let's just, we're going to bring in a ceramic really quick. So I'm going to click on the ceramic button. And that's going to bring in a ceramic for us, okay? And I'm only going to get to the very inside of this. So let's I'm going to clear my contour just so that I'm only showing the very middle portion of this. So I've got this oval, and right now it's 3.543 by 4.724. The reason that's such a weird number is because it's 9 by 12 centimeters. And so it's doing the conversion from the 9 by 12 centimeters in automatically. If I wanted to stay in centimeters, but I don't want to go back and change my units to centimeters, I can simply type in 11 and then cm for centimeters, and then let's say 15 cm for centimeters, and it's automatically going to convert that into inches for us. If we wanted to do any sort of math, let's say we wanted to make sure it's 0.09 inches bigger than what it currently is, so that we've got extra room to blast it deeper or something. You can actually do a plus sign and then 0.09 and do the same thing down here, a plus sign and 0.09, and then hit enter, and it's going to do the math for you inside that box to make it grow the size that you want it to be. So I like that it's got that option to convert units and everything else right inside those boxes, which is really nice. The next thing over is your scale factor. That's how big it is compared to how big it used to be. Okay, so we've resized this, which tells us that it's been scaled. If these numbers aren't the same, it means that it's been stretched. So if I stretch this out, you'll see that that number gets bigger than this one. So that's an indication that whatever you have has been stretched in one direction. If you want to resize things and make sure that they do not do that, where they don't stretch. So if I just type in 6 here, you'll see it's going to stretch. If you don't want it to stretch, then there's the option right next to this lock ratio, which is going to lock that so that it has to be proportional. That way, if I change this to 300, it's going to change this one proportionally so that it doesn't stretch at all. Or if I change this to 4 inches, it's not going to stretch at all, because I have my proportions locked. If I don't want to lock my proportions, then I've got access and control over, how big I want this to be exactly. Okay. So that's what the scale is. That's what lock ratio does. And I added in the most recent workspace the keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-X. That way I can lock that ratio on the fly. If I want to, just hit Control-Shift-X, it's going to lock it so that if I type it in, it's going to be proportional or not. The other reason for that is that I added the ability to do Shift-X. And by doing Shift-X, it actually pops up your object size, this thing here, but right down by your object, as opposed to having to move up to the bar. So that way I can just hit Shift-X and I can say, I want this to be 7 centimeters and I want it to be 13 centimeters, and I can hit enter, and it's going to resize without me having to move my mouse up here, which is kind of nice. And that's, again, I think only in my 20, actually, I don't remember. I just know it's in one of the most recent workspaces. It's not in my older ones. Next is angle of rotation. That's just if I hit 90 degrees or whatever, it's going to rotate 90 degrees. If you do negatives, it's going to go the opposite direction. You didn't really notice other than this node there. But let's say I do negative 45 degrees. So it'll rotate negative as well. If I click and drag, you'll see that update as I rotate it. And then, this is just degrees, so that's what that means. Let's make sure. Yep, same thing, back on the rectangle, same things. Okay, so the next ones over are mirror horizontally and mirror vertically. What mirror is if you have an object and you want to mirror it on itself, not on any other object, on itself, you click the mirror horizontally and it's going to flip it on itself. If you click it this way, it's going to flip vertically on itself. which it shouldn't actually do that. That looks to be like a bug to me. I'll have to play with that some more, but
What did it do?
it actually flipped. You see how it flipped further down?
Oh,
Shouldn't flip further down. It should only flip on itself.
is that because of your location on the
Oh yeah, well, could be.
center ones?
Yeah, that could be. You're right. I bet you're right because of my object origin.
Once a week, I am right, and
Yep.
today I just used it.
So that's not a bug. That's just me not knowing how object origin works. Look, if I change it here, then I guess it's going to flip upward.
That's cool to know, though.
There you go.
We all learn.
Yep. Good job, Charlie.
Woo.
I don't have to send up a bug report. Yeah, so that's what that's doing, is it's flipping on itself, or on its XY axis, on its coordinate system, in either the horizontal or vertical direction. So just to bring in a better example than a circle, if I brought in a design of a bird or something, and I had this bird here in the corner, maybe I want that bird to look inward, but maybe I don't. So if I wanted to flip it on itself, I would just click on this, and now it's going to be looking out instead of looking in. So that I think that makes a little bit more sense than a circle anyway. But that's what mirror horizontal and vertical do. The next one over is our outline width. Unless I'm on rectangle, it's not outline width. So we're going to go back to having a rectangle selected, because rectangles have special options. And so that's why these show up, is because this is actually considered a special object called a rectangle. You can see down here on the bottom, it says rectangle on layer 1. So it's got special options where it will let you change your corners with these options, and then you just choose a size. So let's say we want 1 inch for our radius. It's going to let you change that corner, whether it's a scalloped corner or a chamfered corner or a round corner, depending on how you have that set. And then these are your numbers for how you want the corners to be. This is whether you want it to change all at the same time. So if I change this to 2 inches, it's going to change it all at the same time by that same amount, which in this case made it 2 inches larger than that one. So I probably want to do that. The reason that happened, I believe, is because of this right here, which is relative scaling. If I had that unchecked, then I think what happens is it will, so I'm going to change one of these to a 3.
Yeah, because then you can leave the bottom squared if you want even. And that's really cool for some nice shape effects and panels too.
Yeah, for sure. So I think if I change this one to a 4 now, it's, we'll see what happens. I guess it stayed the same, but it relatively changed it the same amount. So that's what this does, is it's going to scale your corners. Well, okay, let me say that again. Relative is, it's going to make it so that these corners scale as I shrink this down. It's going to scale it if I do that. If I didn't have that selected, then as I drop it down, I think it keeps those. All right. That doesn't seem quite right. You can see my numbers moving here, right? But when you have this unchecked, there we go. Yeah, they're staying the same. Sorry, they just didn't stay the same until I released it. So if I had this at 4 inches and scale it down, they stay at 4 inches. It's just so small that it doesn't matter. Anyway, so that's what scaling is whether you want those to change as you resize your object or not. So you can check that and it'll resize. The next thing over is your outline width. And when we were back on just a regular shape like this, that was going to be the next one, is outline width. So depending again on what we have selected, changes whether or not those other options are in there. So outline width, what that is every object can have an outline. I currently do not have an outline on this object, so it says none. You can also see down here in the lower right-hand corner, this is where the your outline shows up here and your fill color shows up here. So it's got a fill color, but it doesn't have an outline. So if I change this, there's a drop down that allows me to change it, or I can type in an amount. So let's just say 0.125 inches, and it will then outline my object in that size of an outline. It also outlines it based on this line style. It also gives me start and ending arrows based on what we have selected here. So because of this, this is just a solid line with endings that you can't really tell the difference of. But we could change this if we wanted to a dotted line, and we could change our ends to arrows. You know, there's options for doing crazy stuff like that, but you're not going to notice the arrows unless you break this apart so that it's an open shape. Then you're going to see those arrows. But otherwise, it's just going to show up like that. I'm going to mute really fast, just one second.
How's everybody doing?
Can't complain, Charlie. How are you?
I'm great. Getting
Good.
entertainment while Cameron's busy.
You gonna do a little skit for us?
Yeah. I'm gonna get some hand puppets so I can do some puppetry in the future.
Well, I got Prince Naughty Naughty. He'll come down, I'm sure, again.
There we go.
How about Rue? You could pull
Julia,
Rue in.
yeah. I'll be back in just 1 second. I got to email something off really quick.
Oh, take your time. We're gonna have a song. Sing along. We're gonna do it in like, what do you call it when you do it in rounds?
Oh,
You have
yeah.
enough people to really do.
Yep.
We can see your email.
I'm not looking.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. I just need proof of residency. So I'm looking at my, what is it called? My utility bill.
Let's see here.
Julia, I didn't see when you joined. Did you miss much of the beginning?
I did. I couldn't get logged in. Actually, I was etching and forgot, and Brandy calls me. She goes, I need the link to get into the meeting. I'm like, oh, crud. I'm running in the office.
Late for class.
Woohoo.
Well, I hope we didn't interrupt your etching too much.
No, well, I'm like, at least he records it, because I was just feeling panicky, like I missed the first 15 minutes.
Not a problem.
No, you're like, I'm thinking, oh, crud, what am I missing? Okay, Charlie, I'm gonna ask a question.
Yeah.
So I have a praying hands that I put into the grayscale stone, but the outline is not filled in. So like imagine that bird there, but it didn't have a black outline. How would I fill in the outline? What do I do?
But the outline is there?
The outline is there, but it's not filled in. And when I hit,
Oh,
it just stayed the frost color.
okay, so click on it, on the
Okay.
black outline, the outline that you want to be black, and
Yep.
press the 0 key on your keyboard.
And that'll just fill in the outline.
See if that will work. And if-
Okay.
Now, is it filled in with a different color currently?
Nope, it's the same color as, it's frosted, the same as
Okay,
what the
so
bird
it's
would be on
maybe not
there.
even filled.
Right,
Okay, well then you can also double click on that line and just make sure that all the nodes are connected.
okay. Okay,
Yeah, and now if you want, you could always just email it to you could email it to Cameron, or you could when Cameron, when you're back, you have a, you don't have to answer this now, but do you have an email address for questions for training? Like if someone was going to send a file regarding like, hey, look, I made a thing that you did today.
Yep. So the best one for questions is support, SUPPORT, support
Okay.
at memorialdesigner.com.
Yeah, send it to support@memorialdesigner.com and someone will get back to you. That someone will be Cameron, but we'll say someone.
Yeah, well, both of you guys, I have your Facebook messengers and I know how to reach you, so
Yeah. so
sorry
no
about that.
problem. No, it's never a thing to be sorry about. It's just that email address, Cameron monitors that one. So,
Perfect.
but
Gotcha.
yeah, we'll help you get there.
Julia, is that open on your screen right now?
No,
It-
no,
okay.
and actually it's on a different computer. I
Okay.
just,
I just wanted to make sure we shouldn't jump on it real fast and take a look at it, but yeah.
yeah, sorry. It's,
No, that's fine.
it just, I couldn't figure out how to just fill the outline without filling the praying hands and vice versa. I'm like,
So it really depends on the way that the object is. So if we look at this bird, for instance, okay, it's
Yep.
actually a group of objects. So if I were to change it to blue right now, it's going to change everything to blue.
okay,
The reason for that is it's a group, and so it's applying that change to the entire group. So if I don't want that to happen, what I have to do is I would have to select an individual piece inside that group, or I need
Yep.
to ungroup it. So those are two options. If I hold Control and click, it's going to dig in that group, and it's going to then select this piece that I can change to blue, and it's only going to change
Okay.
that one.
that's exactly what was happening. It would all turn black or all
Yeah.
turn,
Most of the time, that's because it's grouped, and you
Okay.
can tell that something is grouped because it's going to show these ungroup options up here when you have
Okay.
it selected. Those are not going to show up if you've got it selected and it's not grouped. It's actually going to show up the option to group it.
oh, okay,
So that's a visual cue that it's either grouped or not grouped.
okay,
Okay.
makes
And,
sense.
and then obviously if it's changing colors of everything, that's why too, because you have everything selected, not just the piece that you want. But I mean, that's only one scenario. It could also be that it's a contour, and that's a little bit different because contours are a little different animal. So sorry for the delay on that. I got my things sent off, and now we'll talk back about our outline. So you can change outlines and stuff if you need to. I don't do a lot of outline changing unless, let's say, I know this isn't going to be the best, but let's say that I've got this is really horrible, but let's just say that I've got the side view of a bench or something, right? And this bench is going to have a cremation thing inside of it, right? Sometimes I want to be able to show this, but show that it's inside another object. And so I will change my thing to a dotted pattern and, maybe make it a little bigger, whatever the case may be, so that it shows that there's something there, but it's not going to show that it's actually, an outline on the object. That's one use case, I guess, for why I would change my outline. I don't know. There's different things I guess you could do, but that's one of the reasons that I would do that. Okay. The way that the outline works though is if we go to the outline property, so I'm going to double click my outline properties down here to pop up the actual properties of this. There's a lot more to this outline than just the way that it looks. There are also whether or not we want to have certain corners. It's whether we want the outline to be centered or go to the outside or go to the inside, whether we want the outline to have caps. There's a lot of information in this. We'll cover that in a different video. But just so that you're aware, outlines have certain characteristics and properties. And you know, so they may or may not show up the way that you want. Right now I have it centered, so you can see my dotted line, and then my outline goes inside and outside of that particular line. If I changed it so that my position was to the inside, it's going to build my outline to the inside. It's very similar now to a contour. We can get to that later as well. They used to be a lot different, but now they're getting more and more similar in the way that you're able to do certain things. The one use that I really use for arrowheads is when I use the this button here, which is my Find Open Shapes. When you click Find Open Shapes, it actually changes my ending points to these so that I can see them better. You can notice up there now they've changed to different arrowheads, and that's why it does it, just so that visually I can see my broken endpoints better. So that's one.
I like that.
And again, another use case for that. I did show one other use case at MBNA in 2018 of being able to create your own arrowheads. I don't have them currently installed, so it's not going to make a whole lot of sense, but I had created arrowheads that were actually the ends of crosses. So depending on what cross style I wanted, I could simply change my my arrowhead style, and I could make crosses that had, you know, certain endings, which was kind of fun and cool, but it was really just to show off.
I like it.
Okay, so that's, we'll go back to our rectangle here. That's what these do, is change your width and your style. And on this one, since it's we can change this into a paragraph text box, it's also giving us options to wrap our text and how we want to wrap our text. I'm not going to turn it into a paragraph text box, so I'm not going to mess with that. These ones are important though, to the front and to the back of your layer. Because we have things layered, because we have things that are in front of other things, we can see this because it's in front of the stone shape. But if all of a sudden we told it to go to the back of the layer or shift page down, you can't see it anymore except for right there, because it's behind something that's filled in and bigger than it. So if I click this, now all of a sudden this shape, that front and back option doesn't show up because it's not on this other property bar, right? And so sometimes you're like, well, where did my button go? Where's my to front of layer or to back of layer button? You know, because it's not on here. That's when I use keyboard shortcuts a lot, shift page up, shift page down, or right click. A lot of times right click is going to have different options as well. So it's got the same ones, back of layer, front of layer. So even if those don't show up on every bar that you want them to show up on, you can still access them. They're just in a different location. The last one is convert to curves. Because this is a rectangle, it's a special shape that is not considered curves, because I can grab these and move them, and you know, this is special properties of a rectangle. It's not going to work the same way as curves. So if I convert it to curves, now all of a sudden it's going to work just like any other time I build things based on curves, where I can take my nodes and move them and whatever else. But that's not going to happen unless I convert it to curves first. And so that's why they give you the option to convert to curves when you have a rectangle selected, because that then lets you modify it differently with the shape tool. If I had selected this, it's not going to give me the convert to curves because it's already curves, so it's not going to convert. It already is curves, right? But it does give me different options. So because these are curves, and whether that was drawn that way or whether it was just drawn freehand like this, it's giving me more options now. This one here is how much smoothing is applied. This especially works when you're drawing with a freehand tool. So this tells me how much I want to smooth that as I draw it. If I do 0 and I start drawing my shape, then it's not going to make it very smooth. If I come in here, you'll see it's pretty jagged. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's definitely pretty. There's, you know, some jaggedness to it, especially right there. So freehand smoothing makes it so that as I draw, it's going to smooth that out by a certain percentage. If I change it to 100, then it's really going to smooth it out, but it's going to look a lot less like my original object because it's smoothing to make it a nice smooth curve, right? So that's what freehand smoothing does, is changes how much smoothing is applied to your curves as you draw them. And the reason that it shows up on this one, even though we didn't draw this by hand, the computer did, our code drew this, and so it is using curves to draw it, and that's why it still shows up there. The next one over is called close curve. That's going to make it so that if your curve that you are drawing was open like this, there's an open end, it's going to show up as this icon because it's open. There's a gap from there to there. If you click on that, it's going to now be closed. So this is actually a visual indicator as to whether or not your object is closed. This one is closed. If I break apart like this, move. Oh, I guess I broke it over here. So if I break this apart now, you'll see that this is showing that it's not closed anymore. So as soon as I click on that, then it's going to close it in, and it's going to fill it because it's a closed curve now that can be filled. Okay. This one's also got break apart on it. The reason for that is that if I had multiple objects like this bird here, that's actually a bunch of different objects combined together, then that would show up, because if I click break apart, it breaks all of those into individual pieces. So that's why that one's on there, is to give you quick access to being able to break it apart. And
Cameron,
yep,
if I wanted to take off that front leaf of that bird right there,
yep.
I would hit break apart.
You can click break apart. That's going to break it all up into the individual pieces. Okay. But then what happens is you'll notice here that the leg is actually attached to that front leaf.
Yep.
So it's going to let me move that much of it.
Okay.
Right? Because it's connected right there, that's what it's going to do. So in this particular case, breaking it apart isn't going to really let me delete that because it's connected to the rest of the stuff, right?
Okay.
If this wasn't connected, if we actually broke apart what's called on the node level, if we broke it apart, so we're breaking apart that node and we're breaking apart that node, now we can separate these pieces. So we've got that one and this one separated, and this one and that one. As long as there's a gap between those, then when we break it apart, it is going to be its own object all by itself that we can select and get rid of.
Okay, thank you.
But because it was connected to that other piece, that wouldn't have worked.
Okay.
So in that case, then you're like, well, okay, then how do I get rid of it? And there are different ways that you can get rid of things. You can use the shape tool to grab the nodes and hit delete and delete them that way. You can use eraser tool to come in and just erase it. You can, Charlie uses one that I don't use very often, but he will grab another piece like this, and then he will shift select this one and do what's called a trim. So he will trim like this, and that will cut it away based off of this. So there's all sorts of different ways you can cut things out or get rid of things. But yeah, just breaking it apart in that particular instance wouldn't have done any good. Ooh, excuse me. The last one is well, so bounding box didn't show up on this one. Okay, bounding box doesn't show up on this one, but it does show up on our curve tools. And the reason for that is when you're drawing freehand, then, as soon as you draw, if you have this not depressed, then what it does is it shows the bounding box, which are these handles. And if I'm in drawing mode and I'm trying to draw things, these get in the way more often than not. And so I turn those off while I'm drawing so that I can draw without having to worry about, you know, where those handles are and not accidentally touching them and that sort of stuff. So I turn the bounding box off while I'm drawing, but it'll show back up if I'm using the pick tool, for instance. Okay, so that's what that is on the property bar there. With curve tools, the last other thing is parallel drawing. This is not in older versions of CorelDRAW, but in the newer versions, you can do parallel drawing where it'll pop up a parallel drawing toolbar. And then you can basically, you're drawing parallel lines while you're drawing. We won't get into that for this video because it would take too much time, but that is an option. Okay. So, I mean, as you can tell, that there's a lot in this property bar because it's so interactive and so unique to whatever tool you're using. There's way too much to cover in one video, so we'll have to do it every time we're using a different tool. We'll cover what's on the property bar for that particular tool. But I do want to point out that as you change your tools, your property bar is going to change to match that tool. Or as you have certain things selected, your property bar is going to change based on your selection. Okay, so that's why it changes so often, is because it's trying to give you quick access to the tools that you need as you need them, as opposed to going and searching for those tools. Does that all make sense? Does anybody have any questions or any comments or anything that you want to see that we didn't show?
Will you just give me the definition of curves? I mean, I don't mean to sound like a dinosaur, but.
No, that's a good question. So a curve, if I use one of these drawing tools, okay, you can have one of two things. You can have a curve or you can have a straight line segment. So if I click once with my freehand and I, excuse me, I let go of the click, okay, but I move my mouse, it's going to draw what's called a straight line segment. And I really want to turn off my parallel drawing while I do that. Okay, so normally it's going to look like that. It's going to draw a straight line segment, and that is a straight line from this point to this point that has no curve at all. It's just a straight line from here to there, okay? If I'm using the same tool and instead I click and drag, it lets me draw freehand. So I can click and draw any shape that I want. Because I can draw any shape that I want, this is called a curve. Okay? This is a curved, it is a curve, okay? Now it gets a little tricky because I can take this straight line segment and it says that it's a curve because technically it is a curve. It's just a straight line segment of a curve.
Okay.
And on the toolbar, when we're looking at the shape tool, this up here tells us whether it's a straight line. This is grayed out because it is a straight line. And this one is showing because it lets us convert that to a curved segment instead of a straight line segment. So if I click on it, now all of a sudden it's a curved straight line segment, but it's not curved at all. It's just giving me the ability now to change and curve things. Whereas before, I didn't have that ability because it was a straight line segment. If I clicked on it, it's going to move it as opposed to give me the ability to reshape it. So if I click on the node, it's going to move the node. If I click anywhere on the line, it's going to move the line. Okay. Whereas if this was a curved segment, it's going to bend based on where I grab it. And pull.
Okay.
So that's a very good question, but that's the difference between a curve and a line segment, or a straight line segment of a curve. And the reason that those are curves is because they're not also some special object like this, which is an ellipse. Okay. Ellipses are special because just like the rectangle that we had, you've got the ability to do things with your ellipse that you wouldn't be able to do with a curve, like change it to a pi, or change it to an arc, or change how many degrees you know, from your starting and ending point. These kind of things apply to your special ellipse shape that don't apply to your regular curves.
Okay,
I would consider those objects are like they're intelligent objects.
Yeah.
And once you convert it to curve, so will you draw a square once, please?
Yeah, so excuse me.
If you draw a square,
So a square, I'd need to actually draw a square, even though it's still considered a rectangle. It's a square because it's the same left and right.
right?
But this
And
is
then,
the rectangle tool over here.
right, and then if you hit the node edit tool or F10 for the shortcut, he can grab the corners. Can you zoom in there a little bit to that, please? Yeah, see how he just moved the corners?
yeah,
Oops. And see how it rounded?
yeah,
Okay, now do me a favor, Cameron, make that one like one color and then duplicate it and make it another color. The second one another color. Thank you, sir. All right, now go ahead and edit the blue one again. Showing that, yeah, see how he's moving that, everybody? Okay, now click on the red one and go ahead and convert that to curves. When he's converted it to curves, it's no longer it's still pretty smart looking, but it's not intelligent anymore. Now would you move a node, please? See?
okay,
Okay.
right.
Same thing with there's certain shapes, your basic shapes, triangle, your circle, your ellipse, your rectangle, your polygon, star, whatever. You can do some pretty cool things with those smart objects. Once you convert it to curves, it's no longer. Now, one more thing, Cameron, could you just type a word, any word, like type Julia and make that a color, and you can change the font. So we're working with text now, right?
Okay,
And you can change the size and you can change the font and you can do whatever. As soon as he converts it to curves, watch what happens. Now convert that one. And then when he clicks on Julia up above, the one that's still text, see how it even gives him the option to choose the text and he can adjust it?
Yep.
But now when he clicks on the bottom version, which has been converted to curves, it's no longer text, it's objects. They're made of curves. So
Okay.
curves is, curves, think of like curves equates to objects.
okay.
That's how I kind of think of it. I like that. I think that's a cool logo. You lived in Florida. It would kind of look like Florida a little bit. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, cool. Thank you, because sometimes just those common words that you're so used to using, I don't quite
Yeah, I
know what they mean.
Oh,
and if you go to other programs, they're going to call it something else sometimes,
Okay.
which is even more confusing, but it's really, a lot of it's just that Corel Draw is the best.
Yep. And one thing too, Julia, I mean, if you've never looked at it, I know if you ever do question anything, if you go to product help, it will pull up Corel's help stuff.
Oh, okay.
And then you can look through here and, get all sorts of written. So I don't have a lot of written stuff. If you like books and you like reading and you like that kind of way of going to things, this is a good option because you can also come up here and search. So I can search curve and it will, give me the object to tell me how to mess with curves and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
Curve, and I don't think it's got really a definitions thing. Maybe it
Can you
does.
type it in the form of a question in the search?
I don't think so. What is a
Curve.
I don't think so.
Okay, all right.
Oh, there's a glossary though. Glossary. So there we go. Here we go. C. Let's go to the glossary. Curve.
C is for cookie.
Curve. Curve. Curve.
Got
Curve.
that here.
Here we go. Curve object. An object that has nodes and control handles which you can manipulate to change the object shape. A curve object can be any shape, including a straight or a curved line. There's your Webster's dictionary definition.
Okay, but then this is going to lead me to something else. Tell me the difference between nodes and control handles. One's circular and one's a square, right?
No, so the difference is a node is each of these things here is a node. What a node is it's your starting and ending point of your line or your curve. Okay. So here's your beginning, here's your ending, right? Those two things are called nodes.
Okay.
Now the handle, the control handle, is if you click on a node, it gives you these dotted lines that then let you control the way that that curves.
Oh, okay.
So they're called
All right.
control handles because they're handles that you're clicking on that control the curvature of your item,
Good deal. See,
Okay.
look at how much I learned today.
right? Good
Now,
stuff.
look at that, because a little while ago, you didn't note it. Now you note it. Get it?
I am so smart.
Yes, absolutely. So that's the difference is, and so these things are nodes, but there are different kinds of nodes. You're mentioning circles and squares and other things like that.
Right.
That's dependent on what kind of node it is, because you can have different kinds of nodes. You can have cusp nodes, which are the squares. You can have smooth nodes. You can have symmetrical nodes.
Okay.
Those have different shapes for the node shape itself, but they're all nodes.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And this one, like I was saying before, because this is a straight line segment, it
Yep.
does not give me handles because there is no curve. There's no curve to control. So it's not
Gotcha.
going to give me a straight lines. It's not going to give me a handle.
Okay.
If I were to add to this line, so I'm going to add to it by creating a curve attached to it.
Yeah.
If I click on this node, it'll give me handles for these sides because those can curve, but it's not going to give me handles for this side
Okay.
because this is a straight line segment. It'll just let me click and move it. It's not going to let me curve it because it can't curve. It's not a curve.
So now are you drawing all this on the you and Charlie on your drawing tablet?
I mean, right now I'm just using my mouse.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah. Technically, the screen I'm using is my drawing tablet screen. But,
Gotcha.
yes. Okay, well,
right.
let's see. Any other questions? That was a good question. I really like those questions, Julia, because it's really the beginner's stuff that, you know, it's vernacular or it's terms and stuff that you don't use in normal language. You know,
Right.
it's specific to this case. It's specific to this program. So it's really good to learn what those terms mean.
Well, and you guys are so used to it. And for somebody coming in who really knows nothing,
Right.
even just finding out what a node is, and you kind of think you do, but it's just nice to get the clarification.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and I would say more often, you'd be surprised how often that a new person will ask a question, and then after researching the question to find an answer, I learn things that, like, I'm learning all the time. I mean, Cameron's teaching me stuff all the time. Every so often I'll stumble across something and I'm like, hey, this, you know, and Cameron, oh, that's interesting. So we're always, it's just the collective of everybody together talking about it. We're going to learn even more. So it's wonderful.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this time more than you know. So thank you guys.
Not a problem. All right. If that's
Great.
everything for today, we will meet on Thursday, Julia. I don't know if you were here for that, but I'm going to be on Friday.
Okay.
So we are switching to Thursday at 10 instead of Friday.
Okay. Awesome.
So 11 Central,
11 your
10
time.
o'clock
Yep.
Cameron time.
All right, I'll put it in my calendar so I don't forget in case Brandy forgets to call me.
There you
See you
go.
later, everybody.
Bye, guys. Have a great one.
Bye.